Hi everyone, it's nice to meet you. My name is Sikai and I'm very grateful to be here today at the invitation of EEF to share more about the work that we've been doing in Asia. In particular, what I wanted to share today would be this pay for success concept that first started in the United Kingdom, but has since accelerated its growth across the world. And what we're trying to do at Trisector is to take that concept and adapt that to Asia. So happy to share more. A couple of things on our agenda today. First, what we're going to look through is some of the key trends that we've been seeing in the region and how that has accelerated the adoption of pay for success as a concept. The second, often the key question is, what is this value that pay for success is bringing to society and who actually benefits from PFS? Third, I wanted to go through some of the case studies that we've seen across Asia, in particular in Singapore and in India. I want to talk about what are some of the key factors you need to consider before trying out PFS. And of course, this is often not an easy journey for stakeholders. Here, I want to share more about also the challenges we've seen trying to design and launch PFS projects in the region and how we've developed solutions to overcome that. And last but not least, share briefly about the opportunities that I see within Thailand, which may be applicable to some of your own contexts as service providers, as funders, or as government agencies that want to work together. Yeah. So across globally and also within Asia, we've been seeing some macro trends that have actually created opportunities for deeper impact. So in particular, the three issues we see here is one, COVID-19 impacting government's budget. So over the last 2 years, most governments around the world had to significantly invest within their own countries to help the country recover. And this has led to a tightening of budgets. Going forward, we anticipate that many governments do need to spend more effectively and really consider kind of the pros and cons and the benefits of how to use the money better. The second big trend that we've seen is a greater push for impact measurement. The various kinds of stakeholders, whether you're a government, a service provider, corporate, or investors, are really now starting to focus on how do we measure the impact that we want to fund or we want to create. Because at the same time, we are seeing that there's a big push of preventing impact washing across the world. And many of these stakeholders are very mindful of being part of the impact washing space and really want to kind of overcome that by focusing on better impact measurement tools. And last but not least, another key macro trend that we're seeing globally is the rise of impact-related investments. So whether that's ESG investments, responsible investing, impact investments, venture philanthropy, a lot of that is picking up over the last decade. I recall in Thailand, there was recently a project launched by Sunsi where they had raised 100 million Thai baht to prevent school dropouts. So this is just one type of impact-related investments that we see in the region and within Thailand. And there are a lot more that's coming up that will come up over the next couple of years. So how have these three macro trends actually helped pay for success kind of accelerate itself? I think in part, one, more fiscal, a better fiscal prudence, greater push for measuring, and also greater private sector involvement have led to this new model called Pay for Success. And I'll go through that shortly. But first, let me cover what's the history of Pay for Success. So Pay for Success started roughly 10 years ago in the UK, in this jurisdiction called Peterborough, where it was used to help fund a criminal justice project. And since then, there have been more than 200 projects around the world, both in developed markets and also more recently in emerging markets, such as Thailand, where it's been used to help raise a significant amount of capital to support various groups of beneficiaries. So whether you're youth, adult, ex-offenders, children, it's all been used. This kind of money has been used to help mobilize not only resources, but also expertise to help create deeper social impact. And based on the studies conducted by research think tanks like Brookings, majority of the projects so far have been able to show success. And I think this is really because of some of the underlying approaches that the Pay for Success tool uses. So let me go through what actually Pay for Success exactly is. I think across the world, there have been many different definitions of Pay for Success, many different names that have been used. Sometimes it's called a social impact bond, social outcomes contract. It's a term that's used in the UK. You might have also heard of development impact bonds. But really, there are two big components that are part of Pay for Success. The first component is this concept of outcomes-based contracting, where there are a certain group of funders would pay for the success that's being created. And in particular, here we are measuring demonstrated outcomes. And the second component of Pay for Success really is innovation funding. So how do we fund ideas and also allow it the flexibility to optimize and over time improve so that it can achieve some of these outcomes. So when both of this comes together, it's called basically Pay for Success. And essentially what we're trying to do is take innovation funding to build new solutions or optimize solutions to achieve a certain set of outcomes, which then be paid for either by government or philanthropy when they're able to actually see the outcome itself. So at Trisector, we ourselves are a nonprofit that's based in Singapore, and we are actually supported by the Singapore government to help take this concept of PFS to Asia. So we've been around for the last 5 years, and as part of our leadership team, we actually have individuals who represent the 3 different sectors, in particular the people sector, the private sector, and the public sector, where they all had their own experiences and are keen to kind of come together and figure out how can each of these sectors work together to advance society's interests and also improve some of the social outcomes. So our experience is twofold. One is locally. So we've been doing some of the work in Singapore and have launched some of Singapore's pioneering projects. Globally, we have also done some work in the region, but we also share knowledge with our US counterparts called Third Sector Capital Partners, who themselves also started this whole PFS journey in US a couple of years ago and have since really brought the market to scale. Briefly, this is some of the work that we've been doing across the region. So we've helped Hong Kong launch their first PFS project. And in Singapore, we have launched three types of PFS projects too, and currently exploring various kinds of projects in the region like Thailand, Vietnam, and also Indonesia. Often what we get asked is, what exactly is the benefits that are generated from PFS and who actually benefits from it, right? So based on the study that's done by Brookings Institution, a think tank that's based in the US, where they had systematically looked through the various kind of Pay for Success projects and figure out, okay, what are the benefits that have been accrued at the project level. And they found here five different kinds of benefits that we think are beneficial for the different stakeholders. So the first is really focusing on outcomes. And this has really benefited the government because they are now able to, be more comfortable and understand the outcomes that have been created. On the service provider side, they have also benefited from this because they're now able to differentiate themselves from other service providers who may not be as outcomes focused or evidence driven. The second kind of benefit we've seen is one of monitoring evaluation. Because of Pay for Success, this has enabled a greater emphasis on evaluation and also allowed it to kind of grow in its space. Often evaluation is a very technical component of projects and is often seen to be the role of the academic evaluator to do it. But over time, many of the service providers have benefited from this because they're now able to learn about different kinds of evaluation techniques and actually incorporate that in-house. Similarly, on the performance management side, service providers have benefited from this because they're now able to access both private and non-profit sector expertise and resources that they otherwise would not have been able to access. Collaboration is also another benefit that we've seen where PFS has been able to strengthen relationships between the different sectors to work together to not only solve the problem that Pay for Success project is creating, but also some of the future problems that we are anticipating. And last but not least, Pay for Success has been a powerful tool to help the different sectors to invest in preventive interventions. And when we say preventive here, it means upstream, early interventions where we can come in before something bad happens and prevent that from happening. So for example, how do we prevent homelessness, unemployment in society? Potentially it's about investing in early childhood education or investing in education and good health. So the benefits you've seen earlier, some people might say that that's hypothetical or theoretical and have often asked us what really happened on the ground with the work that we have done at Trisector. So let me now go through two quick case studies, one in Singapore and another in India, and talk about what are some of the benefits or value proposition that stakeholders were looking for. So in Singapore, the value proposition for Pay for Success is threefold. One, about capacity building. Second, about partnerships. And thirdly, about innovation. And why this is important in the Singapore context. So from the capacity building standpoint, many of the funders and government here have been most interested in building the capacity of service providers, in particular, service providers that are a bit younger and have less experience. So for example, in the youth mental health social impact bond that I'm designing, we are helping a service provider actually serve a brand new segment that they've never served before by helping them get access to networks and expertise that they otherwise would not have been able to. The second benefit is partnerships. In Singapore, the government has played a very strong role in supporting and ensuring that a lot of basic needs are met. And now that we're trying to come to terms with some of the more complex social issues, the government sees cross-sector partnerships as a way to work with the private sector and the non-people sector in a more effective way. And that's been a critical part of their agenda over the last couple of years. And they see PFS as one part of this component of trying to get different parts of society to work together. And lastly, another one's about innovation. So government has been able to fund a lot of policy ideas, interventions, but often they actually need a bit more support in trying to test out new different ideas and also capability building some of these new ideas. So for example, one project they're working on in Singapore is around cash transfer, which is sometimes called unconditional cash transfers or universal basic income, where we are testing that with the hope that one day we can bring that and adapt that into policy. So those tend to be from the government's perspective of what actually are the benefits. Let me now talk about India, where we see some of the benefits at the service provider level. So this is one of India's first impact bond or Pay for Success project, where UBS Optimus Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of UBS, worked with Educate Girls, India-based nonprofit that serves girls in particular to help them improve learning gains, get them to go to school. So in this project, at around year 2, Educate Girls was actually not on track to achieve the learning outcomes they had promised the upfront funders and the outcomes funders. And what they actually did between year 2 and year 3 was to radically change the intervention that they had. So they corrected it by in many different ways. A couple I've mentioned here on this slide, shifting from a classroom focus to a group focus, increasing outreach to students by going door to door, just so that they can come to school. And because of this flexibility allowed by the Pay for Success project, they radically changed the intervention, and in year 3 were able to significantly achieve their outcomes, even more than what's required on the target levels. And the benefit here really for them is this whole idea of having strong performance management that they otherwise would not have been able to get access to without PFS. So given this benefits and sounds that it's really fascinating and interesting, then how do we then start designing a project? And often I think I would break this down into two different broad categories of factors. The first is how desirable is it, and really, do people really want to do it? And the second here is feasibility, whether I can do it. And I think both willingness and ability are critical components of launching a PFS. And the reason why is there are several challenges that have come up during the design and launching of PFS, which we've seen not only from our own experience but also globally. So three big challenges here. The first is there's significant effort in seeking alignment between the different stakeholders. The second is often a lot of the stakeholders, not only the service provider, have some sort of capacity gap that they need to close. And there's a need for resources to be pumped in to help close that capacity gap so that they're ready to launch the PFS. And the third challenge that we've seen here is there's a lot of contracting challenges and operational challenges. Reason why is the first version of PFS that was created do not really fit into the existing procurement structures that governments are used to or philanthropies are used for. Since then, because of some of these challenges we've faced, we and also alongside the PFS community around the world have been thinking of new solutions and ways to overcome some of these challenges. So when it comes to seeking alignment, one of the best practices is to involve stakeholders on day one as much as possible, bring them in and help make sure that there's some sort of trust that's being generated across the different stakeholders. In terms of capacity building, often what usually happens is instead of significantly investing in the project, we will start off with a rapid feasibility study just to figure out what are the gaps and whether this is feasible even. And lastly, on the contracting challenges with at Trisector, we have actually developed new types of PFS, like the social impact guarantees and outcomes amplifier to overcome really some of the significant contracting challenges that we've seen in Singapore. So if today one is able to overcome these challenges and wants to do PFS, often then the question is what happens after the first project? And here, because PFS has been around for 10 years now, we've been able to see how it's slowly changing over time. And what we're noticing is that there's a lot of institutional knowledge and effort being done around PFS. So here we're going to talk about these three different types of ways that we see PFS moving forward in beyond just their first projects. So firstly, it's at the policy level. In the US, for example, the federal government has actually incorporated pay for success as part of their policy. So they created this thing called the social impact partnerships to pay for results, or CIPRA, and they pass it in federal government. And now what this initiative of policy does is it annually directs funding towards local communities and states to explore their own PFS projects. So that's one way that we've seen. Another one is at the government level, so not really at the policy, but at the government office level. Different governments across the world, Japan and Australia included, have set up offices to focus on pay for success. And then thirdly, at a kind of smaller scale level, we've seen governments launching and philanthropies actually launching outcomes funds. We see pooled funding to actually pay for outcomes of certain projects to help accelerate that process of designing a PFS project. So we hope that one day after Thailand has been able to launch their own PFS, they also see a trajectory forward of how they can actually institutionalize PFS. And these are just some of the ways that they can think about it. Last but not least, I also wanted to talk about what I see as different opportunities within Thailand that could be explored. PFS around the world have been used for many different kinds of initiatives, whether it's education, health, and social issues. And for the most part, a lot of the social issues that we are seeing in Thailand are also actual issues that we've seen around the world and where other PFS actors have come in to contribute. So we hope that if there are stakeholders in Thailand that are interested and want to take this forward, there are some of these other kinds of PFS projects where they can learn from and also be inspired to actually accelerate the growth of PFS in the region. So these are just some of the opportunities we see outside of Thailand, which can be applied to the Thailand context. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your time today, and really appreciate the opportunity to share more about the work that we're doing in the region. Thank you.